Welcome to the Avail Podcast, where we dig deep and talk about the art of leadership. My name is Virgil Sierra, and today we have the honor of sitting down with Greg Davis. Greg is a pastor, Bible teacher, and author who is no stranger to adversity. Today, we'll be discussing concepts from his new book, Standing Strong in the Storm, and he'll be sharing some powerful insights and lessons learned from the many storms he and his family have had to overcome. So, without further ado, let's get started. We are back for another Avail Leadership Podcast episode right here with the best leaders in this nation, a lot of leaders from around the globe. Today is not going to disappoint. We are with none other than Pastor Greg Davis. We're going to be talking about his new book. It's going to be a good time. Leaders, pastors, lean in because we are going to learn, we are going to grow, and we are going to get encouraged today. Pastor Greg, it is good to have you in the Avail house here with our viewers and listeners. How does it feel to be on Avail?
Well, I'm very excited to be on the podcast today, and I'm just excited about what God is doing. He's doing some amazing things.
Yeah, he definitely is. I'm excited, Pastor Greg, because your new book, Standing Strong in the Storm, Cultivating Resilience in Times of Trouble, I think it's kind of like one of those books that everybody needs, not to mention leaders and pastors, because in life there are storms. I know we're going to hear a little bit more about your story and your family, but before we jump into the heart of the conversation and your book, can you just share with the Avail listeners and viewers a little bit about who Greg Davis is and where you are, what you do, and how you got here?
Okay. Nancy and I, my wife Nancy and I, have been in ministry together now for 37 years. And through that time period, for the first 13 years, we were youth pastors and worship leaders and those kind of things. For the last 25 years, I've been a lead pastor at Cornerstone Church in South Haven, Mississippi, which is a suburb of Memphis. And so during that time, the Lord has really blessed our church, and we've seen exponential growth. We've planted an extra campus, actually 100 miles away. That was definitely not textbook, but it went fantastically. And so we're just, Nancy and I, part of our unique story, and I'll say this real quick, we have been together. Actually, we just celebrated our 41st wedding anniversary. And hopefully you're sitting there going, wow, you can't be that old. But interestingly enough, last Valentine's Day was the 51st anniversary of the first time I gave her a Valentine's card, because we've been sweethearts since the second grade. And so anyway, but we have two grown kids, and God has been really good to us. We're going to get into the story. We've been through a major amount of adversity, but God is good, and He is a master of all the storms we'll ever go through.
I love this. I love for all of our Avail family to just lean in and learn from pastors like yourself, Greg, that have not only been in ministry for many, many years, but have stories. You have stories, you have experience, and you have life lessons that can help us on our journeys as well. So today we're going to talk about your book. This is your first book. I know there's more books coming, but this is your first book, Standing Strong in the Storm. Can you maybe share a little bit what inspired you to write this book specifically, right? What's the heart behind Standing Strong in the Storm?
Yeah. Well, essentially, this book was inspired by our life story. And I can kind of give you a very, very short Cliff Notes version of that.
Yeah.
But during the time that we have been in ministry, our family has navigated about a dozen life-threatening health issues. My son, when he was born with 5 heart defects, and he had his first heart surgery when he was 7 days old.
Wow.
He's had through his life, but by the time he was 17 years old, he had 6 open heart surgeries.
Wow.
And a bunch of other heart procedures, and he's had more heart procedures since then, but not open heart surgeries. When he was 2, my wife Nancy, my lifelong sweetheart, almost died from an autoimmune disease.
Wow.
And she was off and on bedridden for about 6 months. It was about 6 months before the doctors would even admit to her that they thought she was going to survive.
Wow.
And so very precarious, took years for her to recover. And then so after that, we prayed and wanted to expand our family. And we asked the Lord what to do. And he led us to adopt a baby girl from China. And so that's a long story, but I'll shorten it. The Lord ordered our steps to lead us to the exact girl that was supposed to be our daughter. She was 1 year and 2 weeks old when they placed her in our arms. And 30 days after we got back from China with her, she was diagnosed with brain cancer. And so we went through the whole St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, chemo, radiation. She had less than a 15% chance of even living, virtually zero chance of a real normal life. They told us she would probably never walk, talk, maybe even feed herself, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And then we've had some other little scares in there too. And then about a year ago, I almost died of a massive heart attack. They almost lost me twice that night. And then about 3 months after that, I was diagnosed with 2 brain aneurysms. And so all of everything that I just talked about has happened while we've been in ministry. And 75% of it has happened while we've been pastoring a growing church.
Wow.
And so going through all of these storms in life has basically the lessons that God has taught us, the way that he has helped us to navigate adversity has given us a passion to want to encourage and equip people who are going through the worst times of their life and who are navigating adversity that they don't think they're going to make it through, because the Lord has showed us that he can get us through every storm. And so that's our passion, is to help people, to encourage people, and to share the lessons that God taught us that have brought us through everything that we have been through. And so that's the core of the book.
Man,
I will say this.
Yeah.
Our story is only about 10%. It's illustrations. But the book itself is all the lessons that God taught us from the scriptures that helped us to not only survive, but thrive.
You mentioned something, Pastor Greg. First of all, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being willing to do this. I think that's definitely kind of maybe a God calling upon you and your family in this season. You mentioned you've been in local church ministry over 35 years, including 25 years as lead pastors of a church. And yet you've had to face and overcome a significant amount of storms. Sometimes you think, wait, we're pastors. This isn't supposed to happen to us, right? We're serving the Lord, right? When we serve the Lord, you don't have to go through this kind of storms in your life. So here's my question. What has the Lord taught you in all of this? And how do you reconcile this reality? Because I think it's easy for someone to get bitter, especially saying, Lord, we're your servants, and this is happening to us. I'm just curious to hear, because you said to me that the Lord has taught you a lot through this. So I want to hear a little bit about that.
Yes, he has taught us a great deal about it. And you're right. What you said was it's easy to get bitter. And I have struggled with that, literally. I mean, just being transparent. There were many, many times that the only word in my mind was why.
Yeah.
Lord, I'm trying to serve you. I'm trying to fulfill the call on my life. And why are you allowing all this? And, the things we just talked about, anybody that's been in ministry knows that there is adversity that you're going to go through when you are leading people in a church.
Yeah.
And so everything we just talked about is not even on the list of the stuff that happens in the church.
Right.
So, and we've had a lot of
That's
adversity.
a whole nother list.
But you know how, so the Lord basically taught us about navigating adversity his way. Some people are ruined by their storms. And honestly, there were times years ago when I was on the razor's edge of a very dangerous place. Some people are ruined by their storms, and other people are refined by them.
Come on.
And so it makes all the difference in the world how you navigate these situations and how we go through them. And so the Lord taught us a lot of things about that, which I'll be sharing. But one of the things is that perspective is absolutely huge, because what happens is when we have a crisis in life, if you're a human being and you have a crisis pop up, what do you automatically do? You zoom in and you zero in on that problem because it has grabbed your attention. And that's human nature. That's what we do. But the Lord taught us through this that if we only zoom in on our problem, we fail to recognize the presence of God with us in our fiery furnace.
Right.
We fail to recognize all the blessing of God that is still there in our life. And so we learned early on that we couldn't just focus on the crisis. We had to zoom back out and look at the big picture. And, as the old hymn says, count your blessings. We had to look at the hand of God that was working in our life in a great positive way. And we literally developed a culture of celebration in our family, where my children were raised in a culture of celebration. And one of the funny stories with that is when my daughter, Anna Grace, was, I think, like in first or second grade, something like that. She had made an A on a test or whatever. And so we picked her up from school. And so she got in. She said, I made 100 on my test. And she said, where are we going for our celebratory dinner? Wow, that's a big word for a second grader. But they knew that we were going to celebrate every blessing. And we learned that we had to gaze at the blessing and glance at the pain.
That's good.
And, you can't act like the pain's not there. We have to acknowledge it, but we can't let it control us. And so that's one of the major lessons that we learned. And that really helped us to maintain through a lot of the years, spiritual health. It's really, really important to stay healthy spiritually. And it's easy to not be healthy spiritually when we have unanswered questions and we're in a storm that God's will led us to.
Wow.
Some storms are of our own brewing. We've all made stupid decisions and made dumb decisions and caused, and as a result, had problems in our life. But it's harder for us to process as a pastor, as a minister, as somebody who is following the call of God. It's harder for us to process when God's plan and his perfect will takes us to the eye of the hurricane.
Yeah.
That's harder to process, but God always has a purpose, and we have to keep our eye on the big picture.
Wow, that's so huge. It's funny you mentioned that reference of hurricane. I live in South Florida, and recently there was a hurricane passing by, and that eye can do a lot of damage.
Yes.
I want to say, Pastor Greg, I think that God's grace is evident in your life and in your family. Because I don't think that every person or every pastor, for that matter, can face as many storms and as much adversity as you have, and have this kind of attitude and mentality of being able to focus on God and not focus on the problem. Gazing at the blessing and glancing at the pain. I think usually it's the opposite. I think we want to gaze at the pain and just glance at the blessings because we can get better. So I think your example is so helpful. Now I want to ask you, without giving away the book, obviously the book, I think the book goes in depth with not only parts of your story, as you mentioned, the 10% is a story, but a lot of lessons from the Word of God, biblical lessons, which obviously are applicable and relevant to us. What are a couple of principles from your book, Standing Strong in the Storm, that you feel, especially, we got leaders here connected. This is Avail. We talk leadership, yes. We talk pastors, we talk ministry, Christian leaders. What are a couple of principles that you think, man, leaders need to know this and embrace these principles?
Yes. Well, I kind of mentioned it as the perspective. We have to monitor our mindset.
Yeah.
And that's my heart right now, as far as like that, ministering to pastors, because I know, I've been doing this a long time, and I know the pain, I know the spiritual warfare, I know I know what the betrayals are like, I know what the abandonment is like by people that you would never think that would leave you, all those kind of things. But we have to monitor our mindset, and in this, align it with the purpose of God. In the book, I talk about the mindset of comfort versus combat.
Uh-huh.
And an illustration would be when you go on vacation and you're just disconnected and you just want to go have fun and have a good time. You generally don't have a lot of patience with things that go wrong, because you're like, man, I'm on vacation. Why is this going wrong? So we've got that comfort mindset.
Uh-huh.
But we need to understand that we're always going to be living in a spiritual warfare.
Wow.
Because as leaders, the enemy's kingdom is going to attack us and try to take us out. And so we have to have that combat mindset. And I've told people, soldiers who are in active duty combat in war zones, they're not shocked
Right.
when they come under attack.
Right.
They're not saying, why, God, am I being attacked? They know that there's attacks that are going to come, and they have prepared themselves for those attacks. And we have to have that mindset that we love our comfort zone. We do. I do. But the fact is that God pulls us out of our comfort zone so many times, because facing adversity, overcoming resistance, for instance, I'm sure that a lot of people that I'm talking to right now go to the gym and work out. And we understand, how do you get stronger? When you overcome the resistance of weights in the gym, your muscles get stronger and stronger and stronger if you overcome the resistance correctly to avoid injury. Well, in life, we have to overcome the resistance that we face the right way as well to avoid injury to our emotions and to our spirit. But we also get stronger and stronger and stronger the more resistance that we overcome. And God uses those things. He doesn't cause them. Many times he does allow them.
Right.
But he uses them. I mean, you read through the scripture. Every biblical character that you read about faced adversity, and had to go through storms and had resistance come against them. And God uses that to build our character, but also to build our strength, to prepare us for the ultimate divine destiny that he has for us. And so we learned that we had to monitor our mindset, that perspective was huge, and then perseverance. We had to commit to never quit. I mean, we basically, I've had unanswered questions many times, as pretty much everybody on this listening to this podcast has had. But one of the things I realized early on was that generally I was always going to face a fork in the road. Every time I was going to face a fork in the road, and one direction would be I can either get stuck in my unanswered questions, and that would lead me to spiritual stagnation, or I could keep walking in faith in spite of my unanswered questions, and that leads to spiritual formation. And so to me, the greatest expression of faith is when we can keep moving forward in the path of God's will, when we cannot comprehend why he is allowing certain things to occur in our life. And so again, virtually every biblical character in the Bible experienced times of uncertainty. And there's actually an entire chapter in the book. It's called The Certainty of Uncertainty. And it's an entire chapter on the book that basically deals with biblical strategies and examples of Bible characters, biblical strategies of how we should deal with seasons of uncertainty. And coming out of the last 2.5 years, I don't think there has been a season of uncertainty any greater in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Than what we have just navigated. And so, but they're always going to have those opportunities. So we have to, that perseverance and that perspective, those are two of many of the lessons that God has taught us.
Man, it's funny, Pastor Greg, because as you're talking, almost every other phrase you're saying, I'm taking notes, and almost every other phrase you're saying, I'm thinking, man, that's a message. Man, there's a preaching, there's a teaching there. So this book, everybody who's listening, leaning in right now, this book, Standing Strong in the Storm by Greg Davis. Let me just name a few chapters here. Wishing for a Nightmare, It's Time to Cross Over, Sent into the Storm, Rough Seas, Under His Feet, The Inner Storm. Man, there is so much wisdom I know that's in this book. I haven't had the pleasure yet of holding the book in my hands, but I've been able to skim through and read a little bit through some chapters. Something came to mind as well before I go to the next question, Pastor Greg, and I can't help but think, hearing your story, I can't help but think that at some point you might have identified, and the story of Job may have resonated with you a bit. Would I be right in saying that? Are you following Avail on social media? If you answered no, what are you waiting for? You can enjoy encouraging content, get updates on all our latest resources, and connect with leaders just like you, all from the comfort of your couch. There's no better account to visit in between appointments or over morning coffee. If you haven't found us on Instagram and Facebook yet, look up The Art of Avail and click follow. We can't wait to see you there.
Yes, you would.
Yeah.
I have, I've kind of, I've related to Job in some ways, but he suffered worse than me because here's the thing about it too. And I can kind of give the little ending of the testimony, at least up to this point, and I've kind of alluded to it. My son wasn't supposed to live statistically.
Right.
He is 30 years old.
Wow.
And actually not only healthy, but athletic. He plays sports. And my wife, who was not supposed to live, is actually in fantastic health.
Thank you, Jesus.
And she's not on her medicine anymore that they said she would have to be on for the rest of her life to keep her alive. And then my daughter, who was not supposed to live, and if she did, they thought she would never be able to walk, talk, feed herself, any of that stuff.
Wow.
She has finished 3 years of college. She's 22 and a half years old. She's engaged to be married, and she is the most beloved employee at the place that she works. And my cardiologist was astonished after they examined my heart after the heart attack that almost killed me. He could not find any damage to my heart.
Come on.
And the aneurysms, the brain aneurysms that I have, are very small and very low risk and those things. So God has brought us through. Now I will say this: you know how in the New Testament, let's say Jesus mentions a farmer sowing seed.
Yeah.
His purpose is not to teach us about agriculture. It's not to give us. His purpose is to give us an example that we can envision, so that we can latch on to a kingdom principle.
Totally.
That was what the Lord showed me needed to happen with this book. So what I've done in this book is I have 80-something% of this book is a very deep dive into the storm story in Matthew chapter 14, where Jesus comes walking on the water to his disciples while they're in their storm. And so there's so much treasure. This has been one of my favorite passages for probably at least 15 years. So many lessons that God has taught me that have empowered me to navigate through adversity that I believe that the Lord called me to share with people so that they could be empowered by the word. There's so much treasure in that you do have to dig down, beneath the English language to get to a lot of it. But it's super encouraging, and I'm so glad the book has only been out 3 weeks at this point as we record this, but already getting wonderful testimonies from people who have been very deeply impacted. A lady that lost her husband to COVID, was depressed and just torn up and everything. She told me that after she read this book, that the Lord changed her whole perspective of everything, and her depression went away, and joy came back. And so it's just like God is really doing some wonderful things, and we believe that He's called us. The morning that the Lord showed me, I know I was supposed to be writing for a long time. But the morning that the Lord showed me that I had to do this was back in 2019. And I was reading 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 4, which says that we give praise to the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our trouble, so that we can comfort others with the same comfort that God gave us. And the Lord showed me that morning when I was asking Him, Lord, I still don't understand. Lord, why? Why all of this? And He said, every bit of it was the plan from the beginning. Build a testimony from which you will be able to minister to many people who are going through hard times. And so that is what we feel like God is doing.
This is wonderful. Greg, I really feel as I'm hearing from you and getting to know you a little bit more, even on this podcast, I feel like you are a walking miracle. I feel like you and your family are walking miracles. And because of that, I know that your voice and your story is so important. What would you say? What would you tell someone right now? These last 2 years have been rough for a lot of reasons, for different people, for various reasons.
Yes.
But what would you tell someone who would tell you right now, you know what, Greg, your story is great and all, but they feel that the storms that they're going through don't have purpose, and they feel like they're just needlessly experiencing pain and loss, and difficulty and almost hopeless, what would you say? What would you say to them?
Yeah. Well, I would say this. First of all, I believe that all of our family is walking miracles. But here's the thing: we can't take credit for that.
Right.
That's God.
Right.
You know, we have learned that we have to partner with God, and that's another chapter in the book.
Yes.
Partnering with God. You know, all the miracles that the Lord did, and you know that we see in Scripture, He's always using somebody. He doesn't have to, but He just likes to. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, God always has a purpose. This is one of the lessons the Lord told me and showed me so many times. God always has a purpose in allowing seasons of adversity to come against us. And that purpose is always in perfect alignment with His main purpose for our life. And that is to be conformed to the image of Christ and to be transformed by the renewing of our mind.
Nice.
Speaking of the word mind, all the battles, I mean, every single pastor, every single preacher, every single minister, evangelist listening to this podcast knows very well that the mind is a battlefield. Mm-hmm. The enemy is always going to attack our thoughts and our emotions. And so that's why one of the main reasons that I just shared a while ago that we learned we have to monitor our mindset because the enemy is going to try to sneak in through that door. But God always has a purpose, and we may not understand it while we're going through the storm, but sometimes it's on the other side of the storm that all of a sudden we are at a place where He shows us what was the purpose.
Yeah.
But pulling, again, walking with Him through the storm, going with Him through these times of adversity and doing it His way is what leads us to the pathway of being refined and not ruined. Mm. And so that's what I would say to people. If you don't see the purpose yet, keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. If
you don't know the purpose yet, the Scripture says in many different places, one of which, in Proverbs, don't lean on your own understanding. Mm-hmm. Keep our eyes on Him, keep our trust in Him. And so if you don't know the purpose yet, but look at it this way. It could very well be, I've seen, and you have seen, anybody in ministry has seen this. How many times have you seen someone go through a very difficult time in life and then have God use them to minister to other people who have gone through that? And what we've said is so many times, what? God is able, if we navigate right through adversity, God is able to take the pain of misery and turn it into the power of ministry.
Come on.
I mean, he is able to make that miraculous transition. And so it may very well be that whatever storm we're going through, that God is preparing us. In the Old Testament, I'm sure that after God gave Joseph this dream of, man, I'm going to be elevated and everybody's going to bow down. What Joseph saw as the pit, God saw as prep. Mm-hmm. What he saw as prison, God saw as preparation for the palace. You see, so we have to keep in mind that this is not just about our comfort. It's about becoming everything that God has designed us to be. One of the other examples in the book is, the difference between the pencil lead and the diamond in your ring. What's the difference? They're both different forms of the same element, same chemical element, mm-hmm. carbon. So why is one of them a cheap pencil lead and why is one of them a valuable diamond? The thing that transforms that carbon into the diamond is intense heat and pressure over an extended period of time. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we all want to be diamonds for the Lord, but we don't always like the process because it's going to entail some heat and some pressure. But if we keep our focus on Him and zoom out and see the big picture, He can help us navigate it, and we can come through on the other side stronger instead of weaker and better instead of bitter.
Come on, preach it. I love it. As we're heading towards the final stretch here, Pastor Greg, the final chapter of your book, The Other Side, when you've crossed over, can you talk a little bit about that? What needs to occur when you do get to the other side of your storm?
Well, it's it's important what's happening in the process, but what's going to happen on the other side is that, again, storms are in alignment with God's purpose and those kind of things. On the other side, for instance, the storm that we talked about in Matthew 14, where that Jesus comes walking on the water. On the other side of that storm, previous to that storm was the feeding of the 5,000. So they were basically passing out Happy Meals. Jesus was multiplying them, and they were passing them out. So I'm sure that was super cool to be able to see that. But on the other side of their storm, on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, the scriptures record that every single individual that was brought to Christ was totally healed of every sickness, every disease, every infirmity, every demonic possession.
Wow.
So think about it this way. Previous to their storm, it was super cool, but it was just about provision. After their storm, their faith had been built to a higher level. By the way, during that storm, when the storm was over, was the first time that the Gospel of Matthew records that the disciples worshiped Jesus, and the first time that the Gospel of Matthew records that they declared that he was the Son of God. And so coming through a storm you don't think you're going to make it through will build your faith to a higher level than it's ever been. But on the other side of that storm, it wasn't just about passing out fish and bread. They were seeing lives changed totally by the power of God working through Christ, and they were a part of that. So God always has something greater in store for us on the other side of our storm if we keep our eyes on him as we're walking through it. And we just have to be willing to be used in whatever way he has prepared us for on the other side of our storm.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I love the perspective that you are bringing to the storms that we face in our lives, Pastor Greg. And I love the fact that we can truly find God in the middle of it. I think that's important. I want to have one final question before we talk about how people can connect with you and also how they can get the book. Ultimately, how do you hope this book practically helps people, including leaders and pastors out there?
Well, I just, again, I pray that it will be, by revealing often overlooked biblical principles that can encourage and empower people to navigate storms in alignment with God's plan, and also basically learn how the scripture teaches us to partner with him. See, to partner with God's plan for God's purpose. So there, and again, the exciting testimonies that are coming. So I'm praying, our prayer is that God is going to use this book. Every author wants their book to be a bestseller. Welcome to humanity. But the fact of the matter is that what our prayer is every single day is that God will use this book to literally transform people's perspective and to change the trajectory of their life by seeing them digging into often overlooked biblical principles that can empower us to go through hard times and come through healthier than we were on the other side.
Yeah.
So that's our prayer. That's our prayer.
Yeah. Well, I think your prayer is going to be answered as we have all of our Avail listeners and viewers kind of leaning in right now. Pastor Greg, what's the best way for people to connect with you, to learn more about you, online, website, and then also where can they get the book?
Okay. Well, my website is gregdavisonline.com. And on there, there's some other encouraging devotionals. One of the things that's going on, I've been keeping a devotional journal since 1988, and there's so much treasure that the Lord has showed me that has helped me to navigate all of this stuff. As a matter of fact, there's a whole lot of this book that was born in my devotional journal, years ago. But so gregdavisonline.com is the website, and they can connect there, and they could either sign up for a weekly devotional if they want, or there's other little devotional things there, whatever. And they can actually purchase the book from my website.
Great.
There. They can, look me up on Facebook or whatever. My Instagram account name is all lowercase. It's Greg_Davis_CC, because I started that account when I was pastoring Cornerstone Church. And so they can, do that, and they can buy it on the website. They can, it's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Noble, their website, Books a Million's website, and they're also, they could go to a website, standingstronginthestorm.com. Takes them directly to the publisher, and they can buy the book. Basically, there's a study guide that is available as well, and there's also a masterclass video series that some churches are using as small group studies and things like that. But all of that is available either on my website or on that standingstronginthestorm.com website.
That's wonderful. You heard it, everybody. Leaders, pastors, Christian leaders, go to gregdavisonline.com. Connect with Pastor Greg. Get your hands on this book. Maybe the Lord puts on your heart to get this book for some people in your congregation, to some people in your family or friends who are maybe going through a storm of life, who need to be encouraged. Check it out, gregdavisonline.com. Greg, just to finalize, you also have written an article in one of our recent Avail editions. I want to talk about the Avail Journal. The Avail Journal is one of the premier Christian leadership journals of the moment. Do you enjoy getting the Avail Journal?
Yes, absolutely. And I was so honored when they asked me to write that article in there, which is essentially same subject matter as the book. And those kind of things. And there's an ad in there for it. But yeah, Avail Journal is incredible. Woo! It's incredible leadership.
Hey, everybody, availjournal.com. You can get a free annual subscription. It'll be on us for the first year. They come out quarterly. The Avail Journal, Christian leadership resources that are going to help you. It's a type of magazine you don't want to throw away. It feels good. It looks good. The content is strong for all of you Christian leaders out there, all you pastors out there. Availjournal.com. Hey, can we close off with a final nugget? Just one last thing from your heart for all of our leaders.
Sure. Absolutely. I just want to encourage pastors right now and leaders. In Matthew 14, the story of the storm, there's a couple of lessons that I want to share here. There's a bunch in the book, but here's one of them. One of the things that the Lord taught me was that if you're in the middle of the storm because you followed His plan and followed His will, then He's got a purpose for it, and nothing can keep Jesus from coming to the aid of His people in their storms, even if He has to override the laws of nature.
Come on.
He came walking out on the stormy seas. And the greatest threat to those disciples was not the wind. It was the waves crashing into their boat that could sink that boat. And so another little nugget here is this. Jesus came walking on their greatest threat. Everything they were afraid of was under His feet. Wow. He was dominating the things that were threatening them. And that's exactly what He continues to do to this day. No matter what we're afraid of, no matter what's threatening us, no matter what resistance, what obstruction, what storm, He can walk all over it, and He can bring you through it to the other side. And if you keep your eyes on Him, you will get through to the other side to much greater things.
Woo! Hashtag drop the mic, Pastor Greg. Great wisdom. I love this. I'm going to put some music back here because I'm excited. Come on, everybody. We've been hearing from Pastor Greg Davis. The book is Standing Strong in the Storm, Cultivating Resilience in Times of Trouble. The leader is Pastor Greg Davis. You got to get the book. Go to gregdavisonline.com. Pastor Greg, on behalf of Dr. Sam Chand, Martijn Van Tilborg, our whole Avail leadership team and family, we just want to say we thank you. We honor you, Greg. Thank you for allowing the Lord to use you, and we bless you and your family.
Thank you so much. I am honored and so glad to be connected with the wonderful people with Avail. It is an amazing group of people.
Thank you, sir. Hey, I hope leader, pastor, Christian, influencer, I hope that you've been blessed and encouraged by this Avail podcast episode with Greg Davis. My name is Virgil Sierra, lead pastor of Vertical Church, aka Iglesia Vertical in South Florida, and your host here on the Avail podcast. We'll catch you next time as we keep learning about the art of leadership. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Avail podcast with our guest, Greg Davis. You can connect with Greg at gregdavisonline.com. For more leadership resources, check us out at theartofleadership.com. And make sure to claim your free annual subscription of the Avail Journal at availjournal.com. As always, I'm your Avail Media host, Virgil Sierra. Muchas gracias. Thank you for connecting with us to learn the art of leadership here at the Avail Podcast.